Welcome to Cyber Talks, where we discuss all things about cyber. My name is Oshri. I'm Managing Director at Cy. Today with us, Lior Edgar.
Hello, my name is Lior Edgar. I'm a partner and head of data protection and privacy at EBN, a Tel Aviv law firm.
So let's start by saying, last time we met, do you remember it?
Wow, the old days. We had we had a big incident to discuss.
Yeah. So the last thing I remember, it was really combining cyber and privacy, and this is the reason why I got the idea to join you to those talks. So maybe we can start by asking what exactly is privacy.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for being here. It's great. To talk about privacy in cyber is, I think, maybe the best combination there is, because eventually it's the two sides of the same coin. Privacy actually is, let's say, it's laws, originated from laws and regulations that are dealing with personal data and enforcement and protecting privacy rights.
So how it is related to cyber actually?
Well, actually, I think that privacy is dealing with personal data, which is part of the digital assets that cyber is discussing. And cyber actually is part of privacy because it's a mean to gain protection on personal data of people.
Yeah, we can see that most of our clients is defining the privacy as one of the critical assets. But I'm not sure everyone understands what exactly they need to do to follow the law regarding privacy.
Well, I think that maybe you can say a few words. What exactly is the biggest, how cyber security looks at privacy?
Yeah, so we can see CISOs defining their critical assets. One of them is all the information related to their customers or other privacy related information. They're classifying it, and then they're trying to do the right measurements in order to protect it.
All right, so the other side is that privacy regulation and data protection regulation actually adds another layer of requirements for many organizations, which is not only for the CISO, it's actually for the entire organization, and sometimes it's requirements of reporting requirements, sometimes it's technical and organization measures which we need to adopt, and sometimes it's something very at the heart of policies and procedures that can meet other departments, not only cybersecurity.
So if I'm the CISO and I did my best, I took the right measurements, I opened all the best practices, and I did my best. Am I okay with privacy laws?
Actually, you may be okay, but the organization will not be okay. Meaning that it's possible that perhaps you've adopted the required standards that meets the requirements of the law, which is fine, but the organization itself will be forced to obtain all sorts of policies and procedures, certain contracts with vendors, privacy notices with end users and clients. So there are a bunch of things that are on top of the CISO's head or on the sides, but the CISO is maybe the main factor because it sits on the crossroad, because he's dealing with the processing of the information.
Yeah, so we see a lot of breaches that basically, although people are taking the right measurements, eventually people waking up one day, all their information is out there. So what do I need to do to protect myself against that?
Well, I think that one of the most troubling places for a CISO to be is in a data breach, where you have personal data out there, because then you're not only dealing with the incident itself within the organization, you're also facing challenges that are from the law, legal challenges. For example, maybe or maybe not, you need to report to some sort of a supervisory authority. Maybe you need to report to one of your vendors, or if you have contractual obligations for your clients. So these things are not supposed to stay at the hands of the CISO. He needs to deliver the information to the relevant persons in the organization, like legal, compliance. Sometimes it's COO, CO.
When we are a lot of times going with CISO to to follow, to help them with incident response. And we see a lot of times that they are dealing mostly with the cyber situation, meaning they are patching, they are trying to mitigate the situation. Not always they are thinking about the law. So there is, the CISO itself needs to prepare himself to such incidents regarding privacy?
Well, sure, he needs to do it because it's part of the system, it's part of the funnel that is protecting the organization from, or it's not exactly protecting, the organization needs to be compliant. If you want to be in compliance with the data protection requirement, then you must adhere also at the field of cyber, but also in part of legal and organizational measures that you need to make in place. But eventually a CISO is in the best position to know exactly what happened in an incident or what kind of permissions HR has for personal data of employees, for example, or R&D. They have what kind of access your support group has for the personal information of the client.
And if he wants to hide it, for example, we can see a lot of ransomwares, attacking organizations, and you're trying to mitigate eventually the best way you can. Sometimes it is paying the hacker and just trying to, put it behind you. Do I still need to report?
Well, first of all, you must report internally. This is something that is on the liability of the organization, with the law, with the regulators, also with clients and vendors. So first of all, you must make the internal reporting, and this needs to be mitigated as part of the incident response plan. A response plan is not only technical measures, to mitigate this specific threat or to mitigate a specific incident or data breach. You also need to prepare yourself in the incident response plan, the layer of reporting internally and a layer to report externally to regulators, for example. We have a lot of cases, by the way, of sanctions with millions or tens of millions of dollars or euros, it depends on the authority, that the flaw was that the reporting was not made timely. So
probably it is the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the fine if I'm, eventually a breach was happened and some of my client data is out there? What will happen?
Well, first of all, GDPR, for example, which is the most severe law and most comprehensive privacy law, is talking about 20 million or 4% of your global revenue. So eventually, I'm looking at the graph that is looking at 3 billion euros of fines only in 2022. So eventually,
and only in GDPR, regardless.
Yeah,
it's not in US even.
No, I'm talking about only GDPR. GDPR, by the way, has extraterritorial effect, meaning that if you were processing information of Europeans outside of Europe, then GDPR can still catch you in the net.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're talking about number of fines reach for hundreds a year sometime, and we're talking about all sectors. For example, one of the most famous, I forgot, Amazon, we're talking about 746 million euros. Meta, Facebook, less than $500 million. They had another fine of $390 million. WhatsApp also $225 million. So etc. etc. Eventually, the fines are very high, but let's not talk about the big tech because it's very easy. Okay, eventually you see that there's a lot. The trend is that usually in states like Western Europe, usually you will find very high fines. But some of the countries in Europe, like Bulgaria or Spain or Italy, they don't have very high fines, but you will see a lot of cases. Also in the US, by the way.
Yeah, I think if you look at the big tech, they will get the big fines, but I think the breaches are happening on normally. It's not normally because it's happening all across the board, but when you're trying to do cybersecurity on your organization, if you're a small one, it's very difficult to protect yourself because it is expensive, and you're trying to do whatever you can to follow the latest capabilities to protect yourself. But normally the breaches on the small companies can affect. So for example, if I have 20 million records on 20 million of my customers, it will have the same effect if it will happen from big tech and small company.
Yeah, it's relative. But how do you make the best cybersecurity protection for personal data in a medium-sized company, like you said? Because like you said, it's very expensive. How can you make it more efficient?
Yeah, so today I think there is few options that you can take. A lot of companies either taking external services to assist them, to do the right assessment, to follow the right best practices. A lot of the small companies using open sources and free, freemium, sometimes the type of software that will not cost you, will not be too costly for you to manage. And after that,
it effective, by the way?
It can have the same effect if you have the right people, if you know how to configure them and to maintain them by yourself. I think when you're crossing some threshold of amount of complex in your organization, then it will not be sufficient, and open sources can sometimes cause you other situations. It's not always, people sometimes prefer to pay in order to get the right service.
Yeah, well, I see in many cases you can be not a big tech company, but you're processing very sensitive information like, I don't know, medical or health information, or financial information. That's right. And so you see it. And in those cases, you can be processing millions of users of information, of very sensitive information. But usually you just say, all right, I'm fine with the regulations, with the privacy regulations. I did a privacy assessment. Why do I need to take a certification for security? Why do I need to have a full-blown security compliance program if the risk is only regulatory? The other side.
Yeah, this is the other side, and I think it's luckily that CISOs see the privacy as part of their responsibility because it is one of their critical assets. It's not always the one. Because if you're shutting down the network, of course, CISO will do their best to protect from that and also from breaches in the cloud and so on. But because it is under this umbrella, then in most cases, CISOs will do enough to protect against privacy. But what do you think we should give a CISO maybe a tip or something they need to prepare themselves for a rainy day?
First of all, we talked about the incident response plan, of course, which is it's not easy, but it's it's most successive way. First of all, mitigate the regulatory risk of reporting within your incident response plan. One tip. Another one, you should be aware where are your digital assets, right? So you need to also pay attention, drill down. Where is your sensitive personal information? Now remember, it's not always on the product. We're talking about the environment of HR, also marketing. Sometimes on Salesforce, I have a lot of records, right? So we're talking about HR, marketing, not only the product. Another tip maybe, the system must be in collaboration with the data protection officer or any other function that is responsible for mitigating the privacy risk, regulatory. I mean, what else on the security side?
I think on the security side, besides the normal tips, protect yourself and be ready for every breach. But I think the one thing is related to the preparation, to do tabletop top exercises, to take the management to some room and discussing those situations and simulating them and letting all part of the organization understand that breach can come any day, and then you need to prepare yourself. Once you're ready for it, you can't be ready when it is happening. When it's happened, you can't ask where do I have the keys to Salesforce, because Salesforce can be down, and you need to prepare yourself with maybe a replacement or backup username and password. But not only for those occasions, even from privacy perspective, you can see on the news that you have been breached.
Yeah, sometimes, by the way, it's very awful. I had a few cases like this, that the company had an internal breach, for example, with its employee data, and it was forbidden to make any communications, but then one of the employees left and he reported it to someone press, and everybody knows about it, and then the regulator came to the company, and it's a global company. The regulator came and asked questions, and the first question was, did you have any data breach? Okay, yes. The second, why didn't I get any reporting? So you need to be very aware that even if you are not reporting, like you said, get into the room and make a procedure for your considerations. It's legit. If you don't want to report, it's legit, but make the assumptions and make the analysis on record, okay? And this is something, again, you can make it through simulations, but you also need policies and procedures to think about all the considerations in advance, like you said.
So I think one of the most important one is to be ready for it. If you will not prepare yourself to such an incident, then I think the law will hunt you, because he has some teeth and he can give you fines and so on. But regardless to that, and regardless to the reporting, if you will not prepare yourself, where do I need to report? How do I recover? How can I maybe do a proactive approach with the authorities, maybe to maintain the situation, or maybe trying to take over it with the force of the government or the authorities? Then eventually when it will happen, you can mitigate it in minutes, or you can at least
you can mitigate the risk better.
Yeah.
You can mitigate the risk better. Eventually, it will be quantified in a lower amount. Eventually, yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that when you're having a data protection impact assessment, this is how we call it. When you have a privacy assessment, and you make a compliance program, a privacy compliance program, you must have also a gap analysis for your legal requirements, and then. Even if you're not 100% compliant with all the gap analysis, with all the requirements, even if you're 70% or 80%, first of all, you know what are your gaps, and it's on your work plan, and you're working on mitigating all the gaps. And eventually, like you said, it's also good with regulatory investigations, but we haven't talked about it at all, but class actions are maybe the most severe risk that we have. Economically, most of the companies that we see, for example, in the United States, are being affected by class actions. In class action, you need to prove damage to the user, to the person, and you can see that even if a regulator is not involved, and in a class action, the court will check if you're compliant eventually. Yeah. So, and sometimes there is more.
He will ask the organization to prove that they done the right measurements, right?
Exactly, that you took all the relevant technical and organizational measures in advance to mitigate the privacy risk, to be compliant with the requirements of the law, which is like the minimum standard, okay? And then sometimes courts are talking about what is reasonable, whether or not you met the reasonable standard. For example, for security, the law is saying, for example, you must adhere to permissions, okay? But it's not saying exactly how. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be on commercially reasonable standards. And then the security guys are coming and they will give you what is the average, what is the standard place to be, and whether or not you are above standard, above the average, or less.
So if I'm above the standard, let's take it, or at the average itself, and something,
It's a safe place.
it's a safe place, I will not get fined?
You can, but at least for negligence, you're not.
So if I will get fined anyway, why should I invest in that?
First of all, if the fine is it can be like this and like that.
Yeah.
So it's different, and also in class actions as well. You can prove that you made all the things that you need to do, but eventually there was a hacker, a very strong one, sophisticated one, that took all your data and locked your system. What can you do? It's life, right? But if you haven't had the measures, if your measures were out of standard, then you will get a fine. You will also get the lawsuit that will prove that you were negligent, and then it's a higher damage and higher reparations for the users. So why be in a place like this?
To summarize, basically we need to prepare ourselves, like on any other topic. We need to do the right assessment and preparations for the rainy day.
And it's on the interest of the CISO, because eventually, on the D-Day, the CISO will be at the center of any incident.
Yeah, he will manage it, by the way, not only taking the responsibility on it, but he will have to manage this situation itself. Thank you very much for coming, Lior. It was a pleasure to host you. Hope to see you next time. I hope by discussing this super interesting topic, we were able to help CISOs.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for now. Thank you for joining us for Cyber Talks. See you next time.